Hello, and welcome to Stand With Us Connect. Thank you for joining us for wherever you are around the world. My name is Rena Nasser First, and I'm the Executive Director of Campus Affairs here at Stand With Us. And I'm coming to you live from Brooklyn with Stand With Us Connect, our brand new webinar series. Stand With Us has been on the forefront of getting Israel education to people all around the world in multiple languages. And even during these challenging times, we are committed to making Israel education even more accessible than ever. If you love the work of Stand With Us and you want to continue supporting us, you can do so at standwithus.com/donate. I'm so excited today to be joined by 3 young Latino Christians who are standing up for Israel every single day. On today's live show, we will be exploring the journeys of these young activists and how their identities and backgrounds influence their work in the pro-Israel space. We will hear firsthand about their bridge-building efforts between Christian and Jewish communities and how each of them is impacting the world, one individual at a time. It's my honor to introduce our panelists, starting first with Matthew Garces. Matthew is the Mid-Atlantic Campus Coordinator for Stand With Us, and through this position, he has engaged and mentored hundreds of students on issues relating to Israel and why Christians can be great allies in the fight against anti-Semitism. Matthew is a graduate from the University of Georgia with a bachelor's degree in international affairs and political science and a minor in French. But don't worry, nothing today will be in French. It'll all be in English. As a Christian, Matthew hopes to build bridges between the Jewish and Christian communities and bring a unique perspective on Israel to college campuses and beyond. Matthew, it's great to have you with us today.
It's great to be here too.
Our second panelist is Ivana Gandara, a Guatemalan coordinator for Mashav, the Israeli Agency for International Development and Cooperation. Ivana is also a candidate for a PhD program on the sociology of religion at the Universidad Panamericana in Guatemala City, and is hoping to continue her studies in 2021. After completing her master's in global development and justice at Multnomah University in Portland, Oregon, she began to get involved with Passages, an amazing organization that brings Christian students to Israel, and served as a fellow and a senior fellow during several trips, where she was able to mentor students and share her passions and experiences with them. Since 2019, she has served as the co-president of the Guatemalan chapter for the Philos Project, and during her time with Philos, she seeks to engage fellow Christians in learning about Israel and the wider Middle East through a variety of programs and opportunities. Ivana, it's great to see you. Thanks for being with us today.
Best regards from Guatemala, an honor and privilege to be with you today.
Amazing. And our last but not least panelist, we have Dimas Guaico, a student in his last year at Bob Jones University, who is studying international relations with an emphasis on the Middle East. Dimas is a Christian of Chilean and Dominican ancestry, but is from New York and has garnered a serious passion for Israel. While in college, Dimas became involved with Passages and served as a Passages Fellow, where he was also able to share his passion for Israel with his peers. Soon after, Dimas became a Stand With Us Hispanic Emerson Fellow, where he organized several pro-Israel events at his university and at his church. In his role as the Hispanic Emerson Fellow with Stand With Us, Dimas has had the unique opportunity to educate fellow Latinos and Christians on why it's important to learn about Israel and combat anti-Semitism on college campuses and abroad. Dimas, we're excited to hear what you have to share with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All of you come from different backgrounds, different places. It would be so great to kickstart this conversation by getting into that a bit, hearing more about you, your family backgrounds, and how those backgrounds influence your opinion on Israel. Matt, why don't you go first? Tell us a bit more about you.
Of course. So I was actually born in the United States. However, both of my parents are from Colombia, born and raised. My home growing up was not a Zionist one. We didn't know anything about Israel or even about Jews for that matter. However, I do remember learning about biblical Israel at my church. I remember learning about how it seemed like everyone hated them. The Philistines, the Babylonians, the Romans, and the list goes on and on and on. I remember asking my mom in Spanish, "Mom, why are they so hated?" And she responded, "It's because they're God's chosen people." At the time, I didn't really know what that meant. Usually when you hear someone or something getting a lot of hatred, the first reaction you get is, well, if they're so hated, they must have done something wrong, right? However, I chose to believe otherwise. What my mom said stuck with me all the way through college, which is when I first began learning about Israel. Long story short, I fell in love with the country and its history and even visited 3 different times. One of the things about Israel that really resonated with me was the history of wars and conflicts against Israel. Similar to biblical Israel, I was shocked to learn about the history of all these conflicts and all the vitriol Israel got. For 72 years, Israelis have been victims of wars perpetrated by its neighbors since literally the day after its inception. And so in Colombia, I have a very similar story. My family was some of many Colombians caught in the middle of a very bloody 6-decade-long civil war between the government and the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. In this conflict, 260,000 people died during the conflict, most of them civilians, and millions of more displaced. When I learned about the decades of conflict and violence against Israel, I was able to empathize with them, knowing that my family had gone through similar things. Now, one thing that might surprise you about Colombia is that several times it's voted one of the world's happiest countries by several polls and surveys, including Gallup. How can it be that a country with decades of armed conflict and generations of trauma has such happy people? That'll take a long time to answer. But one thing is for sure, despite all the war and violence, I learned that Israelis, just like Colombians, just like my family, learn how to overcome these challenges and become a resilient and happy people. This is one of the many reasons why I choose to support Israel in its effort to live in a peaceful Middle East as a Jewish and democratic state.
Wow, that's incredible to be able to see the parallels between your family's background and Israel. Amazing. Ivana, how about you? Tell us a bit more about your background and how that's influenced your opinions on Israel.
Yes, I born in the U.S. However, my family is from Guatemala. I grew up and I was raised in Guatemala in a Latino culture. Now I am 30 years old, and as a professional in foreign affairs, development, and global justice, I am very passionate about Israel and the impact of Israel in the entire world. And I am an activist against anti-Semitism. I have always lived in a Christian environment. I am a fifth generation of Christian leaders. My ancestors received some of the first Christian missionaries that came to Guatemala, and my parents are pastors in East Guatemala too. Since children, I have learned about the importance of Christians, about blessing Israel. It's something imperative for me. It's something in my moral values, in my Christian ethics, and it is also an important remark in the Bible. You can see that in Genesis 12:3, which declares, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the people on earth will be blessed through you. And this includes Guatemala too. This is a promise from God in this declaration. And this is a principal connection I see between divinity, Israel, and I as a Guatemala. I also see Israel as a reference of the biblical roots of my faith. Also, it is very important to mention that as a Guatemalan, since I was a children, I understood that Israel matters, that Israel is a very important country and nation for us. I learned this principle not only in my home, as a Christian home, but also in the school. You need to know that Guatemala played an historical and important and relevant role in the United Nations, in the Israel's independence process, because our delegate in the UN, Jorge Garcia Granados, on May 14, 1948, he played an important role because moved other Latin American nations to support and to vote in favor of the creation of the state of Israel. You can see that there is favor, 13 against, and 11 abstentions. And you will see later, I will explain the important impact and important role that our delegate before the UN played in that time.
Ivana, it's incredible to hear what big of a role Israel plays in your life, that it's part of your life every day. That's amazing.
It's a very important issue, yeah.
Definitely. Dimas, tell us a bit about you and how your background has influenced your opinions on Israel.
So I was born and raised in New York City to immigrant parents, like Rena said. My mom's from the Dominican Republic, my dad's from Chile. And one thing that they brought over from their countries was their faith. I was born into a Christian household, a pastor's household, my dad being a pastor. Growing up, my faith has always been a very important part in my life. And without even me noticing it, Israel was also present in that. As I reached adulthood, I began asking myself, Dimas, what is your identity? When people ask you, who is Dimas? What do I say? As I studied on my own this question, I came to realize that my faith is actually the most important thing to me. And my identity, first and foremost, is as a Christian. And if I'm going to hold true to that, then I must realize that my Holy Scriptures was written in a Jewish context and Jewish world. I need to realize that the center figure of my faith, who is Jesus Christ, is Jewish. My Old Testament heroes like Yaakov and Moshe, King David, King Solomon, were all Jewish. If I'm to understand who I am, I must understand where my Judeo-Christian faith comes from. And that ultimately comes from Israel. So.
Wow. So far, we're getting shout outs from New York, from Florida, from Texas, other places in the US, Colombia, and Canada. So people are tuning in from all over. Ivana, as a professional in this space, what would you say are your biggest challenges and your biggest successes when trying to promote Israeli opportunities and resources?
Yeah, I should say that I have the honor and privilege to work for the Embassy of the State of Israel in Guatemala, which is concurrent for Honduras. I am the coordinator for Mashab, that is Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation. I coordinate that for both countries. It is such an honor, such a privilege. I have learned so much, when I was studying my bachelor degree and master degree too. I always saw Israel as a development holistic model for the nations, and was my dream one day to be one of the Mashab alumni. But I have now the honor to coordinate that for both countries, Guatemala and Honduras. I will say that the biggest challenge I have faced is the development action, because development is so broad, so holistic. Sometimes development efforts are abstract. You cannot see that. And as a development professional, you want to reach all the people in need. You see the poverty and you want to do an impact. You want to do a change. You want to do something. And Israel is working so hard in the nations to promote the holistic development through empowerment. In Israel, you will learn that the development model is empowering, and they teach you how to do things. And Israel teach you how to compete in the market through innovation, technology, entrepreneurship in all the holistic arenas. Agriculture, for example, the drip irrigation system, Israel invented that. Or the water desalinization, or producing water from the air, or producing cherry tomatoes in the desert, or gardening in the desert. You will see. Israel is a democracy. We have so much to learn from them, and they are promoting in developing nations capacity building through education. So professionals from developing nations are traveling to Israel. They get scholarships and they go to different centers in Israel in agriculture, education, women empowerment, tourism, energy management, water management, and they get training in short-term courses of between 2 and 3 weeks with the scholarships. When they come back to their countries of origin, they have to share the knowledge with the locals. And this is where development starts, because you learn in order to train others. So this is very, very important. Mashab, this is an interesting point. Mashab was founded in 1958, only 10 years after the independence of Israel. They were exporting the development model to the nations. Can you imagine that? Being with 10 years as a state, born as a state, and you start promoting development in the nations. I believe it's a unique scenario in history in the nations. We have so much to learn. Today, they have presence in more than 140 countries around the world, training thousands of professionals. And also, a remarkable point regarding diplomatic relations is that Guatemala supports a lot Israel. So this makes Guatemala a priority for the foreign policy of Israel. Just to give you an example, in 2019, we returned our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem after United States. So this is a remarkable point because, and also in history, Guatemala was the first country in the world to put an embassy in Jerusalem after the independence process in 1948. So because of this, I could say Mashav is like the biggest success in my laboral sphere, and it's such an honor and privilege. I have learned so much, and I'm very excited to show Mashav to all Guatemalans and people from Honduras, because I have seen that the impact is incredible, and the work that the Mashav alumni are doing is exceptional, because they are training others in order to be actors of their own development.
Wow. Ivana, it sounds like you have your hands full, but you're doing amazing things. Dimas, from the student perspective, as a student leader within this space, what's it like engaging your peers? What kind of resources and opportunities are available for you? And overall, what's that like?
Well, being a student leader in the space has been such a rewarding experience, as well as an opportunity for me to grow. What I love about engaging with my peers is definitely their passion. This time of college is a crucial part of our lives. This is the time that we move from teenagers to adults in just a span of 4 years. So this is a reason why campuses are filled with so many different types of clubs and organizations, just trying to get students passionate about just pretty much anything. And because you can capture that passion, find an outlet for it, most likely you will be passionate about it for the rest of your life. And that's what I try to do when I'm working with my peers, trying to capture that passion and give it an outlet and watch them grow and go out and change the world. But for the organizations that I've worked with on campuses, I actually first became passionate about Israel, working, connecting Christian and Jewish communities with Pastors Israel. Like previously mentioned, Pastors Israel is a nonprofit organization that takes Christian college students to a 10-day trip to Israel to learn more about biblical roots and discover what the miracle of modern Israel is. And Pastors helps a lot, try to coordinate trips for students all around the United States. Another organization definitely has been Stand With Us for the past year as an Emerson Fellow. The amount of resources and training that I've been given have truly been invaluable in promoting pro-Israel educational programming and events on my campus. So
I'm happy to hear that we're able to provide you with resources. That Passages is, you're doing incredible work, and it's important that you have that support. I would also love to know, and I'm sure the audience would too, what's Christian support for Israel like? Are there any misconceptions? What can you tell us about Christian support for Israel? Dimas, I'm going to kick it back to you again. What do you think?
Well, this is such a great question, and I can honestly spend so much time talking about it. But before we can dive into this question, we must understand the Christian church and the Jewish community have a very complicated history. And for Christians that are supportive of Israel, we must be aware and also acknowledge that history, acknowledge the fact that in the name of the church and the cross, many atrocities were carried out against the Jewish community. Crusades, Inquisition, pogroms across Europe. Also, certainly the indifference Christians had during World War II that deepened the hurt and the pain of the Jewish people. That in and of itself should be enough for Christians to say our past created hurt and pain for the Jewish people. But now it is for us to change that. It is up to us to stand arm in arm with the Jewish community and say never again. On the flip side, though, Christian Zionists have always existed. We can see this specifically in Vad Vashem, where so many Christians have been honored as righteous among the nations. I would also like to say that Christian support for Israel is intrinsically tied into our identity as a Christian, whether Christians realize it or not. One of the New Testament writers named Paul, who was a Pharisee and was a student of the great rabbi and Jewish scholar Gamaliel, writes to a group of Christians in Rome. This is from the book of Romans, and I quote, "I asked then, has God rejected his people?" And then Paul's answer himself, "By no means. For I myself, an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin, God has not rejected his people." Then later on in the same letter, he likens the Jewish people as an olive tree. And just like farmers graft branches from other trees into the main tree, so have Christians been grafted into the tree, and we share those same Jewish roots. He makes this distinction to make no doubt that Christians, because of their Jewish roots, have not replaced the Jewish people as God's chosen people, but have a new tie and a new bond to the Jewish people. And this bond to the Jewish people and to Israel, Christians cannot deny it. It is our duty to stand together and work together to preserve our Judeo-Christian values and preserve and protect the land of Israel that is so important and crucial for our faiths.
Thanks for sharing that. Matt, do you have any additional insights you'd want to add?
Of course, yeah. So I want to say 100% agree with what Dimas said. The history of Christian oppression against Jews is definitely hurting and not great to acknowledge, but the fact that we acknowledge it is powerful. I do want to say that during the Holocaust, which is one of the greatest atrocities we've seen in our lifetime, certainly there were actively, while the church was silent, there were a lot of Christians who were very much actively trying to save Jews or fight the Nazis. We have people like theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer or Corrie ten Boom. And many of these Christians, like Dimas said, were featured in The Righteous Among Nations. And actually in Jerusalem, there's a museum called the Friends of Zion Museum that specifically highlights the stories of these Christians and other Gentiles who've sought and risked their lives to save the Jewish people. I highly recommend everyone go there if you guys are in Jerusalem when everything opens up back again. But I do want to say, I actually wanted to share with you guys a really interesting survey that the Philos Project actually put together a few years ago with the help of Lifeway Research. It actually went and asked several Hispanic Christians about their attitudes on Israel in both Catholic and Protestant Christians. And so here's a few numbers I want to share with you guys. 50% of Hispanic Christians support Israel statehood, while 35% are not sure. 45% perceive Israel in a positive light, while 28% are not sure. 72% of Hispanic Christians are concerned about the safety of Christians living under the Palestinian Authority. Now, this is really important because I think right now, in what we're doing right now, and also what we hope to continue to accomplish, is that more and more Christians and more Hispanic Christians are starting to learn about Israel, are starting to understand those roots that they have. And I think it's imperative for us as Latinos, as Christians, to speak out. And the thing that the survey kind of highlights is super, super key. By the way, it's a 38-page survey. I highly recommend everyone read it. It's on the website of the Philos Project. But a few things that it kind of highlights. Number one, those who are self-identified evangelicals and those who attend church more frequently are usually the ones that are most supportive of Israel. Number two, most Hispanic Christians have some sort of pro-Israel views. And number three, only 1 in 4 Hispanics do not have an opinion on Israel. Like I said, this is the crux of the opportunity to seize and really try to talk to our brethren, our Latino brothers and sisters, and Christian brothers and sisters to really get that notion out there that supporting Israel is supporting justice and being an ally to the Jewish people in that cause.
Hearing about Christian support for Israel is garnering a lot of excitement currently from Guatemala, California, New Jersey, UK, Israel, South America, and Chile. So all of you have some of your home countries rooting for you and for this call, which is incredible. All of you have been to Israel multiple times, and I'm sure many people who are watching this have been to Israel multiple times. We'd love to know, what would you say was the most rewarding experience or moving experience that you had, whether it was something small or it was something big? Ivana, let's hear from you.
As I mentioned, what most impressed me was the level of development. I mean, when I went to Israel, first I was very excited to learn about the roots of my faith. And the image I have in my mind about Israel was the image I learned in the Bible or in the social media, war issues, for example. But when I came to Israel, wow, the story changed. I was impressed because it's a combination between the old cities, Jerusalem, but also Tel Aviv, for example, where you can see the modern city, and you can see the different companies about technology that are investing in Israel. I was very impressed about how they conserve their culture, they conserve their traditions, and they are having a mix with the West, right? We also had the opportunity through passages. That was the experience I have. I have traveled to Israel 4 times between 2017 to 2019. I traveled 4 times to Israel with passages. 1 time as a participant, two times as a leader, and 1 time as a leader of leaders, leading more than 140 students from the United States. So it's an amazing experience because for me, as an American Guatemalan, was a cross-cultural experience with them. I also, through passages, had the opportunity to witness an educational background in a holistic perspective in Israel. We visited the Knesset. We witnessed the political aspect of Israel. I was impressed about the level of participation of women, for example, in the Knesset, which represents the 25% of this institution. I was very impressed about the democracy level in Israel, how they respect, how they are fighting for human rights and for the objectives of sustainable development, and that's why they are fulfilling that, and they are exporting now that to the nations. I was just impressed that every time I want to go back to Israel, I learn so much from them, and I think those are the remarkable points of my 4 trips to Israel. And every time you come back, you will see something new, something that will impress you.
I love that. Especially the representation of women, right? As fellow women, that's definitely exciting to see.
Absolutely.
Dimas, whenever you've had your trips to Israel, what are some moments that stuck out to you?
So I've been to Israel twice, once as a participant of Pastors Israel, the second time as a leader, a fellow for my university. And then I'll be hopefully going for my 3rd time in this December as a Bonhoeffer Fellow for Christians United for Israel. To be honest, no one really prepared me for Israel. I was raised with Bible stories and then also with the mainstream media. So these two really gave me a really wrong idea of what Israel is like. And I thought I was going to land in some village, get out the plane with sand everywhere. There's going to be a shepherd boy somewhere nearby, a machine gun in the background. And honestly, nothing could have prepared me for the actual truth and reality. I reached the modern metropolis of Tel Aviv, and for 10 days, I explore a vibrant modern society with such an ancient history. I vividly remember actually walking from my hotel room, which is in the neighborhood of Kiryat Moshe in Jerusalem, and walked toward the Mehen Yehuda market at night. And it was so surprising to me how alive the market was at night. There was music, food, people all over the place enjoying, having a great time. People from all over the place, all over the world, from all walks of life, Orthodox, secular, IDF soldiers, Arabs, Christians, everyone just together enjoying life in this market. And honestly, this kind of made me feel being home. Latinos are known for having a good time, and a good time always involves food, music, and people everywhere. So honestly, as soon as I got back home and my parents asked me, "Oh, so how was Israel? Tell me about Israel." I just told them that it felt like me being home.
Oh, that gave me goosebumps. I love that. I definitely miss the vibrancy of Israel. Sounds like you've all been more than I have, so I think I got to book my ticket pretty soon. Matt, tell us about a time that you've been to Israel and an experience that really stuck out to you and really moved you.
Definitely. So I've also had the privilege of going to Israel 3 different times on several trips. And just like Ivana and Dimas, I've had so many eye-opening experiences that have really changed my perception of Israel. But I want to talk about a time I had in 2016, which was my first time in Israel. I was in Jerusalem. This was May of 2016. I was in Jerusalem. I was leaving a souvenir shop. And all of a sudden I hear a woman in English ask a group of men next to the souvenir shop, "Are you guys watching the soccer game?" And for those that may be fans of soccer, I hope many of you, because Latinos love soccer and football. It was the Champions League final between Real Madrid and Athletic Madrid. So the Palestinian or the men said yes. And I found out that they were Palestinian men who were working in Jerusalem. So I was there for 15, 20 minutes, just talking to them about soccer. And then all of a sudden, an Israeli soldier comes up to us and he starts speaking in Arabic to the Palestinian men. Obviously, I don't speak any Arabic. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they were talking relatively calmly. And then eventually the soldier left, and I asked the Palestinian man, what was the soldier saying? And then he responded and said, well, he was actually just asking about the game, and we were talking about the game a little bit. But he also said, I don't really like that guy. I was really confused by this because I didn't really understand the gravity of the conflict. But what I did recognize in hindsight was, despite the tenseness of the conflict, soccer, sports, brought them out of the tenseness of the conflict and allowed them to have a good, peaceful conversation about sports. Now, as a huge soccer fan, that makes me really excited. And the fact that los deportes nos puede unir, sports can really unite us, is an exciting thing. And that really made me a fan of sports as a catalyst for peace in many grassroots efforts. And actually, I learned about the Shimon Peres Center for Peace and Innovation. They schedule, before coronavirus, they scheduled a lot of soccer matches between Israeli and Palestinian youth as a way to bridge the gap between these two communities. And honestly, to this day, I keep that experience near and dear to my heart, and I hope that that can resume one day after Corona is over.
Matt, did you get to play any soccer?
No, I did not. I did not. But I remember walking in Jerusalem and hearing this was like an hour later, hearing roars everywhere. I think Real Madrid had just won the Champions League. So a lot of Real Madrid fans in Israel. Sorry, Barcelona fans, if you're watching.
They'll have to forgive you for that. Alex from London has a really good question. He wants to know, or Alex wants to know, what's the toughest part about being Christian and supporting Israel? And within that, we'd also love to know if there are Christian Latino Zionists watching, what's something you'd want to share with them? What's a piece of advice you'd want to give them? Dima, what's your take on the question?
Well, that's a good question. I would say that the lack of information that there is specifically for Latin American Christians in the United States, I feel like sometimes this Israel message and the pro-Israel message is kind of lost between the weeds. And yes, it's there. And yes, we're casually supportive of Israel, but in reality, there's nothing kind of to give us some backbone to that, some information, some education. So I would say that maybe one of the drawbacks is one of the things that our community has been trying to change that slowly, but recently, as a lot of efforts with the Philos Project and their Hispanic side of that is providing educational materials for Christians in the United States, for Spanish-speaking Christians in the United States. A lot of books, a lot of good literature has been published, and a lot of good efforts by different organizations have been coming out forward with that.
That's great. Danielle from New York wants to know, is it tough getting someone who's secular to care about Israel? If someone's not Jewish, but they're not Christian, or maybe they're not religious, how do we engage them? Matt, I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Of course. Yeah. So obviously, every day in my life, I will counteract or interact with people who are religious, who are atheists or agnostic, whatever it may be. And the first thing I usually tell them is that, you don't have to be religious to support Israel. I mean, we have a lot of Israelis, especially the ones in Tel Aviv, are sometimes pretty secular. And there's a lot to really appreciate about Israel. Just because you're not religious doesn't mean you can't appreciate like the holy sites. I mean, historically speaking, these are the sites that millions and millions of people around the world like really look up to. And so at the end of the day, I would just tell them that there is a piece of Israel for everybody. You don't have to be Christian. You don't have to be Jewish. You can be Muslim, atheist, agnostic. You can be of any skin color, any gender. And Israel there's a place in Israel for you. And you can see it when you go to Tel Aviv, you go to Jerusalem, you go to Haifa, you go to the south in the desert, or you go to the north in the Galilee. There's literally so much in Israel that you can explore and really get to learn more about Israel and really share that even with secular people, and at the end of the day, if you support democracy and human rights, Israel's the place for you.
That's so true. There's so many ways that people connect to Israel, and what you're sharing is to really help people find their way, find their connection that's going to make sense to them and speak to their values.
Exactly.
An inspirational message. Ivana, since you're coming to us from Guatemala, what's something you'd like everyone to know about Latino support for Israel?
Wow. Regarding the Latino support for Israel, despite the political and ideological differences we have in Latin America context, I believe it's important to know history. What was the impact of the Latinos with Israel, recognizing the creation of the state? I should say that it's important to know that historically, this region left a remarkable mark in the creation of the state. I want to return again to 1948 in the UN. From the 33 votes in favor of the creation of the state in Resolution 181, 13 were from Latin America. Which countries? Guatemala, Bolivia, Brazil, Costa Rica, República Dominicana, Ecuador, Haiti, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela. In this historical context, this group of countries represented a force in unity, and it was considered the biggest bloc, representing 35% of the entire votes. You can see there the impact. And what about Guatemala? What was the leadership of our delegate before the UN, Granados? So in 1948, Guatemala became the first Latin American country to recognize the creation of the State of Israel. Also, Guatemala was the first Latin American country to establish the diplomatic relations. Guatemala was the first country to open an embassy in Jerusalem that was there until 1980, and recently, after the United States, was the second country in the world to return the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in May 2018. Also, in Guatemala, every year on May 14, we celebrate the Day of Friendship between Guatemala and Israel. You can see a lot of activities in the schools with the children learning about the history of Israel, the Holocaust, and the impact they are doing in the entire world. Remarkable points in Guatemala also is that we have a parliamentary league of friendship with Israel, with a group of congressmen, and also in the judiciary system, we have a league of judges supporting Israel. On May also, or April, we have some parades supporting Israel across Guatemala. You will see a lot of people, principally from the evangelical churches, going to the street with Israeli flags supporting this state. And also, in the evangelical churches in Guatemala, and the majority of them, you will see an Israeli flag together with the Guatemalan flag as a sign of and remembrance about the importance of praying about Israel and the importance of supporting them and the importance of being an advocate for this nation. I believe that it's important to recognize the role and impact that Latino historically gave to Israel, but also to promote the continuation of this support today. Today, sadly, the anti-Semitism, you can see that around the world, is exposed through social media, mockeries, and real-life attacks. So for that purpose, I believe education is the key. Education is the principal resource we have, the education in the new generations, the empowerment of the young generations, to be a voice, to be a force, and to speak. Defending human dignity, right? And because Israel has the right to exist as a state, and Israel also has the right to put their capital in their historical land, Jerusalem.
Thank you for that. I couldn't agree more. Education is the path to peace. What it really does is opens people's eyes and allow them to relate to the story and to the history and to the people like no other way. That's amazing. Much. Well, the question specifically for you from Danny, who's asking from Texas, what do you think about the BDS movement on campus? It might not be something that you've personally encountered, or maybe it is. But we'd love to know from you, as a college student and a prominent leader within the pro-Israel community, what's your advice for someone when they're dealing with BDS on their campus? What would you recommend they do?
Well, first of all, I would love to say that to kind of explain a little bit, BDS is the boycott divestment movement in sections. And it's a movement designed to stop Israeli trade and business and commerce, to try to cripple Israeli economy. And this has been very prevalent in the last years. This is kind of the new face of anti-Semitism in the United States, has been the BDS movement, especially on campuses. Like I said, college students are a very passionate group of individuals, and sometimes those passions can lead into these sorts of organizations. And I would definitely tell Danny that there are organizations like Stand With Us, like Students Standing for Israel, SSI, organizations like this that are standing up on campuses and educating. And like Rena said, and Ivana, education is key. Understanding what is the BDS movement and what it actually entails and what it does. It's very important to know all of those things. Definitely, like I said, look into Stand With Us, has a lot of resources online you can look. Also, there's going to be chapters of Stand With Us and SSI and Hillel even on campuses that you can directly go and ask for resources and help when it comes to these kinds of topics.
Thanks for that. The biggest thing with that movement is understanding that you're not alone, even though it feels that way. And I think you really conveyed that message well. Matt, as someone who works in this field, someone who is teaching about the history of Israel, How do you explain the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to someone who really doesn't know anything? Where do you start?
Wow, well, that's a difficult question for sure, because honestly, you can sit and learn about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for years and still not understand it. I've been studying it for years, and there's still things that I don't fully understand. But I would say that there are a lot of places to start, right? You can look at it from a historical lens, right? Understanding the Jewish experience, understanding the story of the Jewish people, where they come from, why Zionism is a movement that was birthed a couple hundred years ago, or even thousands of years ago. Understanding that is I think the first great step to understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Second, I would say understanding the role of religion. As we all know, it's the Holy Land. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all see Jerusalem as a holy city. That's millions of people in this world. So understanding each religion's attachment to this land is very, very key. And then lastly, I would try to seek to understand the current geopolitics of the region, understanding Israel's placement in the Middle East, understanding its surroundings, right? Understanding Egypt, Jordan, the Palestinians in the West Bank, in Gaza, Lebanon, groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, understanding Iran's role in the region, understanding Israel's relationship with other Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and so on and so forth. I think that's really, really helpful to understand. Now, we'll say Metropolis offers a lot of great opportunities and resources to really start that process. We do a lot of introductory lectures on the conflict around Israel to better understand Israel, understand why the Jewish people have such a strong connection to this land. And honestly, like, it's not too late to start. You don't have to be a college student. You don't have to be young. You can be in your 50s and 60s and start learning about the conflict. And I encourage everyone who wants to learn more to do some more research. And if you want to get more in touch, more resources, then we're happy to give some suggestions as well.
What's so great about what you said is that Israel's history doesn't start in 48. Right? Israel's story starts 3,000 years earlier with indigenous presence in the land. And starting at that point can really help someone grasp what Israel is, who Israel is, and why Israel is. So I think that's a great point you made, and I wanted to amplify that.
Exactly, I agree with that.
What is your experience like, Matt, working with the Jewish pro-Israel community? And alternatively, how can they get more involved with your work?
Of course. So I definitely want to say that I didn't have a Jewish friend or meet somebody who was Jewish until my freshman year of college in 2014. That was a mere 6 years ago. And so honestly, I have a relatively little experience compared to other people about being around the Jewish community. I would say that at first it was definitely a challenge. I think the biggest challenge that I faced was considering that I went from being the majority to the minority. What I mean by that is I grew up as a Christian. In the United States of America, being the Christian means you're part of the majority. However, when you are involved in a cultural space that is majority Jewish, there's a paradox that happens there where the Christian who was once the majority is now the minority. And adapting to the environment wasn't always smooth. I'll give you guys a funny example. Last summer, we were in New York for work-related reasons, and Sandwich had just hired two new coordinators. One of which was actually a modern Orthodox Jew from New York. I wanted to be nice and polite. I wanted to say hi to her, so I extended my hand and said hi. But she rejected it, saying that she can't do that. I was kind of shocked and a little bit embarrassed. And then somebody eventually told me that she was Shomer Negia, which, for those that don't know what that means, essentially it's like a Jewish custom where they're not allowed to touch somebody of the opposite sex unless it's their family or their partner, their husband. And it was kind of hilarious, honestly, when I think about it now, because that was not the first time it happened to me. It was the second time it happened to me. It literally happened to me on my first day on the job in 2018. So I'll definitely say it was an experience, but now, in all seriousness, being in this space has allowed me to better understand the Jewish experience, understand how the Jewish people went from being an oppressed and persecuted minority in the world to become a strong and resilient people. And I see it in all of my coworkers. I see it with all the Jewish people I interact with. They're so passionate, so driven, and so with so much like care for their people and for Israel. It really inspires me to step up my game and to really be an ally to them. And I continue to hopefully look forward to learning more and building more bridges between Jewish Christian communities. And as for the second question about getting involved, Like I said, Stanwell is such an incredible organization. I wouldn't be able to have done this and be as active as I am without the organization's platform and resources. And if you're a student or you know somebody who's a student in high school or college who needs some resources, reach out to us. I would encourage you guys to attend more webinars. Honestly, we have so many opportunities for everyone. You don't have to be a college student. You can be somebody who's older in the community who's just very passionate about Israel. I encourage you all to get involved.
Thank you. Wow. I'm sure I speak for everyone joining us from wherever they're joining from that this was an incredibly moving afternoon. Thank you to each of you for taking the time to join us, for sharing your stories, and for the work that you do. I know just hearing about what you're doing and seeing what you're doing, how many people you've impacted. I can only imagine how many people you've impacted today within the past 45 minutes. And I'm excited to see where else you can go in your work. And I'm with you, Stand With Us is with you, and everyone in the audience is with you too. Thank you all so much. And everyone, for the next Stand With Us Connect session. Thank you.
Thank you.